back. So I went through the hole in the wall that I had made after coming home to Luciferio being possessed. I have to say, not necessarily my finest moment with Luciferio. However, there was and still is a very good reason to investigate the hole in the wall. And that is that whatever the curse is, whatever it was, had existed primarily in a way that wasn't accessible before. And so by doing this, and by going through the hole that I made, there was a way to finally see exactly what this curse is and finally deal with it as the prompting of my journey, not only to understand why rabbits were a deterrent, but also as to why my family couldn't really be close. As you can hear, there's quite a bit of excitement around my house as of late. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely a change. So, getting to the hole in the wall, there had always been this feeling from whenever the hole first appeared, and again, the overwhelming sense of dread and fear from whatever was inside of Luciferio. That thing, whatever it was, took up quite a bit of space within my house. And beyond just kicking him, there was little residue of his presence. So it was hard to hold on to my body getting near the door whenever I did step back towards it after getting back into my body. So it all started out as like a sparks, white, kind of hot, like on a exterior level, not an internal level. And there was this always present sense of not being allowed to go without being seen, observed, and monitored in this space once I actually stepped into the hole that's in the living room. There was quite a few different things that had taken place before and during my excursion, but one of them was a couple of my relatives wanting to stay and hold up here for a while. And that was fine with me for a while. Like, as a go-to, I was fine with it because for some reason, the more people that came into this house, the less active it got, as it usually does, because it's supposed to increase, but it didn't for the first time, which was curious. So I entered the hole, and it's quite the sight to behold on the other side. Like dark spaghetti strung everywhere and attached, wrapped around itself, and flung all over the place, and kind of plays like putty. I don't know why silly glue comes to mind, but silly glue. All these things were bound and meshed together when I entered this space. Could liken it to something like Doctor Strange. Yeah, that'd be the easiest one for anybody who does not get spaghetti. So entering that space from the portal, that was a very interesting time because the moment I stepped in was the moment that things got a little stranger when it came to sensations. It was like being somewhere I had been before, but also a place that's violent. Like everything there was hostile or not exactly what I was expecting. So there was always this sense of not necessarily dread, not necessarily calm either. There was this sense of impending, like something was it going to happen, or something did happen. And the entire time being there, it was a lot like that. And it was like swimming in water rather than, floating around like Casper the Friendly Ghost. Everything was pretty dense, like being underwater quite a ways. And there was definitely a pressure there. It was always obvious what I was carrying or what kind of energy was bound to my body because those parts felt like they were being crushed under a vice and it wouldn't loosen up. My leg, my chest, even my inner ear felt like it was going to explode being in that place. But the more I just kept with it and didn't really lose why I was there and why I wanted to be there, why I had even come in the first place, it made it easier to move through it. And the more I moved, the more it became like sludge, the more it began to thicken. And the vice became less of a vice and more like having air pumped into those parts of the body, my leg, my chest, my inner ear. So it felt like it was going to explode. Less in the squeezing manner and more in the from the inside out manner. So that took place during the interdimensional travel. So as I began this journey, many things were obvious to me. It was simple. All of it just became really simple. And it first started off very complex, which was why it was like water, and then started hardening, thickening, was because it was becoming more complicated before it became simple. So the more I moved, and the more I was moving towards my goal, which was the end of this curse, the final whatever I was looking for. That push was really hard because it was almost like suffocating. like willing to keel over just from the pressure of it all and the exposure of it all. Just being exposed to it in that place was just beyond words, but excruciating. Excruciating for many reasons, though I should get back to it. So this journey, I'm off so many different tangents. Just trying to concentrate on this, focus on this. So eventually I was able to cut a path straight to whatever this thing was. Whatever this thing was, it had taken on like a veil, like it was like some sort of like depiction of an angel wearing a garb, have the wings and all of that, and looked like a star from far away. So I got close to it, real close to it. And it's like the closer I got, the further away it got. One of those you've ever had a dream like that or ever seen the trope of that in anything, you'll know. You'll know what I mean. So it kept moving further away and trying to actually get to it had always been a bit of a challenge, especially at the beginning. So that's when it got the furthest away, was when I was not really able to focus because it was like being in that place was like a bombardment of things. And it's not necessarily tangible things at first. It's all loosely based, complex, ridiculous things, and they're everywhere. And that's the entire thing you had to move through in order to even get to whatever it is that you were looking for in this place. For me, I was figuring it out, finally piecing it together or eliminating it, because figuring it out is just that's just a whole nother hassle. All right. So there was a point in it in which I was able to finally bind energy with some of the substance that was around, and it was less that the substance was there to distract or even to keep me off guard. It's more of this substance was there, but it was formless. So it needed energy to make a form out of it. So I took whatever was the most beneficial that I could comprehend and put energy into it and use it to build a pathway to it, directly to it, not taking it a mile, not taking it in 100 miles or 1,000 yards or a light year. It's just getting there as soon as possible. So an escalator of light was what I made. I got on it and I was instantly there, instantly before this thing hits me with a little bout of nausea, just recounting it. Though moving through this strongly, this thing was like a sick presence. Like everything about it was just nasty, disgusting. Not something you'd want to touch necessarily, not something you'd really want to be around or breathe around, because it comes off as very caustic. So when I finally got up to this thing, the same concept of like making something had escaped me, because the more you're in this realm, the more it's like dreamlike. So it's easier to get lost, to get distracted by all the like shiny baubles and things that don't go anywhere. So I finally constructed something in order to cut through that permanently, more like a helmet, to keep that awareness. So once I was able to finally see this thing, it was like a rainbow show. This thing was all over the place, and it wasn't necessarily the best rainbow that anyone could ever. It was more compromised. It was more dark. It was more inverted. It had its own feeling of gross. Best way to put it. It just felt disgusting. Just most rancid thing. So, cutting into this thing by using whatever I could and whatever energy I could while the awareness was fresh allowed me to finally confront it. And this thing took the form of like a nasty, almost like a blob of baby. Like it's not really formed like a fetus in the womb, but it's like more like taken apart and turned into. And those things, getting near it made it giggle. And there was something unnerving about it and even more distressing about it doing that. So going into it and going against this thing was more about solidarity in myself to just finally stand up to it and the way it represented itself and the way that its presence was is very much, yes, as you say, inversion is perversion. This thing is very much that. I'm pretty sure whatever entities are, from for the most part, they will take on different shapes, different forms, because they will assimilate their form regarding what kind of presence you have and then what doesn't work for your specific knowledge that you have. Your own awareness has to comprehend what you're seeing. And even when you can comprehend it and translate it, as I'm doing now, it doesn't make it any more comfortable. It makes it even less comfortable because it means that it has to be comprehensible at some point. Um, Moving back to the story at hand. So I had to play this game to keep myself aware and to keep my imagination and creativity alive in this place, because the more I was able to do that while in the presence of this thing, it didn't feed it because I wasn't actively staying disturbed by the things that it would do. I would have to create things, different realities around this thing, and how to work that into an advantage in order to best it. And eventually I did. It released like this large clout of purple energy. Actually beating it was more like building a very complex but very simple shape world around it, like putting it in a kid's play pit in like a McDonald's or a Burger King. So putting it in a playpen was the best way to keep it confined. And then whatever energy was left in there, which of course you would want to use something that's stronger than it, which is usually love. So like the love for my family, the love for my rabbits that I lost, all of these things were easier to make around this entity and allowed that entity to just disperse. And that's where the purple energy came from, was its dispersion in this field, but it's locked there. So if the entity, ever tried to reconstruct itself, it would just get broken apart again. So an advanced jail, best way to put it. So the purple energy released, and at the same time I felt all that heaviness, all that pressure that I discussed earlier about feeling like bubbles were in my body trying to burst, make my limb explode, make my inner ear explode, make my chest explode. Those things just have been alleviating ever since. It's almost like calm echoes, like leaving a cave. And it's leaving in a very good way, a very solid way, as it has been for a good couple of hours now since I went in. I didn't really know whether or not that was going to be the answer, or whether or not I was going to finally be free of that life, of dealing with the things that I've been dealing with. But just remembering all the love that I put into that space for that was just so easy that I never want to forget that. I never want to forget that it wasn't because I was angry, or it even wasn't because I was fed up. It wasn't even because I was scared that things got easier in there. It was because I actually had something to love more than the situation could demand of me or take from me in this case. So I'd stayed there for a long time, a good while after it dispersed. I got wanted more fireworks, more of a show, but like that wasn't necessary. All of that wasn't necessary. Having the show, having sparks fly because I finally defeated something that I honestly couldn't tell you what. So moving from that and finally being able to leave was such a strong drive in me when I finally left. When I left, I saw some things. I saw my rabbits, all the rabbits I lost. And there was a clarity about it because at first it was all singular rabbits, and then it became all together, and they each had a presence, almost like a very familiar presence. Not like the rabbits that I knew, because that's familiar, but like people that I knew rather than animals that I knew. So when I finally came out and all that energy and all that drive finally wore off, I just sat around for a while amongst my family and still around, still doing whatever they're doing. Talked with them for a while. And the damnedest thing, all my little bunnies, hour after hour, finally came home. Every last one of them has come back. Here, I lost him forever to some unknown force, to my curse. I wanted so badly to have them back. The moment they were gone, but I'm glad the rabbits I did have still, that I decided to give to other people, get a new home. Because in a way I was kind of hiding behind them because they were there and I didn't have anybody else. Couldn't have family nearby, couldn't have them in my house. Couldn't live a life with them because it would destroy everything else. But yeah, my bunnies finally came home. Really couldn't ask for more than that. And the irony is that even though I wanted fireworks from that side of things, when I got back and when my bunnies started showing up, my family offered to go out and buy fireworks. Might not be the only psychic in the house. At least, not anymore.